Good morning, everyone. It's Andrew with Stock Talk. We've got Austin here. It's been quite a good weekend. And we have John Anderson joining us from Triumph Gold, CEO and president over there at Triumph Gold. There's lots to catch up on. I know a little bit about Triumph up in the Yukon, but we want to get a catch up, not the entire story of what's happened in the last years, but catch up as to what's happening as we roll into a season up there in the Northwest. So, Austin, how was your weekend? How are you doing?
Great, busy moving into the new house, into the new studio setup. So that was exciting, and just happy to have that over and done with, pretty much.
Good, yes. All right, let's move on to Triumph Gold. John, how have things been going?
Things are going great, and I really appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to speak with you again, Andrew. I know we're very familiar with the story about 2 years ago, and of course.
Yeah.
Last year, it was a little quiet up in the Yukon. Most of that was obviously because of COVID restrictions for people from outside of the territory. But we did a little bit of work. It was fairly important what we did, but we are really gearing up for a robust program this year. But since that time, we've actually made a lot of changes internally to the company.
Yes.
And I think that's one thing I'd like to get across is that we've been, historically, we would have a former president who was our VP of exploration before that. We've actually now built a very strong technical team. We've opened an office in Kelowna. Just about a year ago, I was approached by a gentleman named Brian Bauer, who is now our lead director. And he knows rocks in BC and Yukon, and he approached me and he said, "Look, we know what you have, and you're not going to find it with a one-man machine. We've got a very good vice president of exploration, Jesse Haley, who's been on the property for 4 years with us. But let's build a team around him that really understands the rocks and people that have worked together, been there, done that." And so Brian was most notably known for building the technical team that found the new Afton mine, which has been in production for over a decade.
Yeah.
But they didn't just find the mine. They developed the resource. They built the mine and operated it for 3 years ago. And so he came to me a couple of weeks later and said, "I'm pretty confident I can get the band back together." And so we've pretty much done that for the last 7 months.
Yeah.
And these people have been working together cohesively they've gone through all the historical data, which no one's really done with this project. It was a project that was put together that had 3 large property packages that were consolidated by a prospector, Bill Harris, just after the Yukon government got control of administering its natural resources. And our company has spent over $40 million on the ground. We've got 145,000 meters of drilling, just thousands of soil samples. And this new technical team with different skill sets took a real kind of a step back. And over the last 7 months, they've analyzed all of that data. They've consulted with many different third-party companies. Most notably Mir Geosciences that did a 3D inverse magnetic survey, which shows that our 6-kilometer long soil anomaly is actually sitting over top of a very massive structure. And we've got a good 3D picture of that. We know the model for that is valid because last year we drilled right up to where it daylights, and we had a discovery that sits underneath a known resource of over 2 million ounces gold equivalent. So we know that's a valid model, but what's even more interesting is we engaged an artificial intelligence firm, like a true artificial intelligence firm, Minerva Geosciences.
Yeah.
And with 145,000 meters of drilling and thousands of samples and trenching and even an old mine on the project, we're able to really understand what the macro side of our project is and where these big deposits in the Yukon along the Big Creek Fault are how they're found, how they're formed, and where they are. And we're very fortunate to, we haven't published those results yet, but we're very confident what we're going to do this summer. And I think it's going to be a game-changing year for Triumph.
Cool. And yeah, so I could take a little bit of a step back for everyone. Like in the Yukon, a lot of people don't realize that, and this is going back a couple of years, like between federal and the provincial government up there, they spent something like $400 or $500 million on roads, so just on infrastructure. And I would say to people, you're not just building roads for no apparent reason. Like there's no reason to spend that much kind of money unless you know there's a ton of mining that's going to be required and it's coming out of the Yukon. And we know it's a very resource-rich area. So whenever the government kind of gives the nod that we're going to put that much infrastructure and roads in, it's a good sign. So I kind of always like to bring that back into focus because people will think Yukon is barren, there's nothing up there. So well, yeah, there's lots of roads leading to potential hopeful mines, and especially this corridor that you guys have, which is like a district scale. Like to some, it might seem almost too daunting. Like that's a big package, like 6 kilometer strength of package there. This huge whole corridor that runs across it's definitely blue sky for sure. It's large, and we can look to nearby, like a White Gold, which is nearby, Coffee Creek, the old Kaminak, stock. Lots of big potential with lots of big neighbors that have been doing quite well.
Yeah, Andrea, I think that's a really good important point about the infrastructure. And actually, we're actually blessed with one of the only along that Big Creek fault. Our property is actually already is road accessible, maintained by the government. It's right off the Klondike Highway, which is a 2 and 3 lane highway up to Fairbanks, Alaska. There's a mine that's 20 miles just north of us called the Minto Mine that's been operating for over a decade. And we've got that infrastructure that it's incredible, the benefits of it for prospecting, for accessing things, but also for cost. And the reason that road is there is because there's a lot of historical mining on our property. There's actually still 3 big placer operations on our property, and the only thing that connects us from the billion-ton casino deposit Western Copperez, and of course our largest shareholder, which is Newmont, that owns the coffee project, is barren land, and that's where a lot of that infrastructure is going to be improved upon on our property, and then accessing right up to their properties once one of those 2 companies decides to go ahead with a commercial production scenario. And of course, with the rising gold and copper prices, I think that is very much more likely to happen.
Yeah, and I would say most people are feeling quite strong about commodities right now. Certainly, whether it's silver or gold as well. And in fact, as just a side note, we're going to do a whole separate show just on Basel III, which is talking about the requirements that are going to be needed for a lot of derivatives contracts and for specifically the gold bullion reserve. And in London, it's going to be a big change, or theoretically a big change for the gold specifically market coming forward. And I think people, just your generalist investor, people in Canada, are becoming a lot more aware of there's a need, a critical need and demand for a lot of resources, and we need to start putting a lot of these projects together and get them going.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just to jump in on what you're saying there, Andrew, I think you're seeing people sort of waking up on that front as well. People who normally wouldn't be paying attention to these spaces, paying attention to commodities, and especially to gold, and in particular with the path forward that we're kind of looking at. People are paying attention that never would have been looking at this before, and it's generating a lot of interest and a lot of excitement in that. We can see it. That's reflected in the stocks that people are looking at. We can see it reflected in the volume that all sorts of gold and silver mining companies are getting. So just to expand on that point, I think you're absolutely right about that. It's extremely important. I'm looking forward to when we do go kind of dissect the Basel III thing and all the potential outcomes that could have for us going forward as well.
Yes, no, thanks. Yes, for sure. It's certainly interesting times, and that will play a big key, factor, moving forward. And when you're looking at a place like the Yukon, if people don't recognize as well, as the geology is a little bit easier going than say a Northern BC Golden Triangle type of thing, where everyone thinks, oh my goodness, like your helicopter jumping along everywhere. The infrastructure and the roads, it's a lot more accessible and friendly, even though it's remote. It isn't the same thing as, some companies have to spend $3, $4, $5 million on helicopters a year just to get to site, to do this, to that, move, resources in and out to site in a short window over the summer. You have a longer window up there in the Yukon, and you've got a lot of big names. And like you said, you've got Newmont. I think it's 12% of the company. Zijin Mining's got 8 or 9% of Triumph Gold. So you've got some big names as well as some institutional holdings on the company. They see, there's an opportunity here.
Yeah, and Rio Tinto just showed up in the area too, just last month by taking 20% interest in Western Copper.
Okay. Yes.
So you got all the big guys there, and the Yukon isn't seeing a lot of action in the market as much because everyone's chasing these what's going on in Newfoundland, which is a real valid exploration boom. But again, we're blessed. I mean, the area was one of the more prominent areas in the world up until 1982. When the mining markets shut down, and then in the 1990s, when you had the resurgence of mining, the Yukon and British Columbia saw very little because of the governmental issues at the time, a socialist government. But that's all changed, wide open, and the Yukon government got control of administering its natural resources from the federal government, and that's really why the North has opened up so much.
And so moving forward, I mean, you guys have a lot going on this drill season. I think you've got 4.3 million cash. Is that about right?
Yeah, we've got, that's about what we've got going into this year's program. Typically, in the last 4 years, we've raised $5 to $6 million about this time for the program. This year, we're not raising money at this stage. We've already got to do what we want to do.
Yeah. So so what moving forward? What should we be looking for? I'm sure it's going to be fairly aggressive. Like what kind of news flow this summer? You've got targets laid out. You've got them kind of set. Yep,
we're just going through the final stages of that right now. I think we're going to announce the results of the AI information that we came up with. It'll be very, very technical, but it tells a lot. Yeah. And then we're going to prioritize with our big shareholders. We're not just doing this alone. Again, we've got Newmont as a 12% shareholder, and they're re-engaged. We also just acquired land adjacent to ours after we did that AI study. We showed it to Teck Resources, and Teck was so impressed they gave us their property for some shares and a royalty. So we're going to look at that as well.
See, that's very nice. Yes, is that the Big Creek property? Yes.
So they've had it for a couple of years, and of course they don't do greenfield, brownfield exploration. They usually buy something.
Yes.
And so we've got those cost-effective benefits of doing exploration that they don't.
No, and one thing I want to point out too is people. You'll see 100. I think it's 186 million shares out, which people might think, okay, that's a lot out. But you've held this company together through really tough, rough times, and not only just through COVID, but I mean before that. So it's not really for the length of time. It's not really a lot of shares out. Because people could roll back the shares and it looks clean, but you've done right by investors by not doing that. And the stock, if you find something this kind of district scale and you can prove up some size, it's not hard to add a ton of value.
Yeah, if you look at that, when we took over in 2015, and the shares were trading at a nickel. We did very well. We raised good money with good shareholders that most of them still own the shares. And 2017 onwards, it was a bear market up until really last summer, and we defied the bear market, and that was based on exploration success.
Yeah.
And literally we fell off the face of the earth a year ago, share price wise, when we did a poor job explaining why we did a 3-mile step out, and people just thought the dream was dead. But that was kind of like a wildcat hole that, again, I'll take full responsibility. We didn't really explain that properly to the marketplace. So we're very confident where we're going, and really excited about this year for sure.
Yeah, I think that's to bring it right kind of back to one is that it's important whenever you see the technical team, and then the inclusion of these large, like, Newmont, whatnot, actively working with you. It's a lot of times with all these projects, you're trying to de-risk them while still keeping a healthy amount of risk because you want the upside. that it looks good whenever you have the partners that you have and the people that you have that are looking at this. And once again, when I looked at it 2 years ago, pretty exciting, and it looked great. It's just you had a bit of issues there in the short gap, and it's great to see that you're back on track and going into this drill season, hopefully with a ton of news flow and lots of good direction to provide.
Yeah, well, we'll have a lot of news flow for sure. And I think the other thing is we have over 2 million ounces gold and gold equivalent with copper, and that resource was done at $1,500 gold and $2 copper. Of course, all of our exploration work has been done outside of that, and so we do know that there's a lot of upside for the exploration that we've been doing for the last couple of years beyond that resource.
And you guys are what, 175 kilometers from Whitehorse, is it?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
Yep.
And then what's your closest mill and all that? Is there stuff fairly close by as well?
Well, there's the Minto mine that's been operating for over a decade, which is just 20 miles north of
20 miles away. Yes. Okay.
But the magnitude of this project is there would be something that would have to be built. It is
it's big. Yeah. That's you need to have a big partner. But the thing is, that's what's exciting is because of the size. It's a district scale. This isn't a small local kind of scale. It's a district scale. You need to have a big partner, which you have two already. You've got two.
Yeah.
So it's really exciting to see what's developing up there, and I know you've been traveling quite a bit lately. And what should we be looking for in the near term? With what's going on, do you have the team up there right now? Are they? I know you're amassing the data from the AI. I guess you're.
Yeah, no, we're doing this all in stages. So we're going back and doing a lot of old historical work that was done on the project. We found one area that was never really looked at. A company called Placer Dome used to own the part of the property in the 1970s, and we found just a few months ago an old feasibility study that was done in conjunction with that asset. That was going to build a mine at 300 ton a day in 1982. And they didn't drill the property. They built tunnels in the side of the hill until they found the vein. Then they drifted 1,500 feet and came up with a 1 million ton resource at a quarter ounce gold. In 1982, they were going to put that in production, make $33 to $38 million a year for 5 years. Could you imagine what those numbers are today at $2,000 gold?
Oh my goodness! Yeah.
So we're going through those stages, and then once we finalize the drill program, which we should have done in the next 2 weeks, we'll be up there right away.
Excellent.
Awesome. Yeah.
Well, I mean, this is pretty exciting. It's pretty cool. I'm glad that you've put it back on the radar for us to take a look at because, like the Yukon has been sadly overlooked. The odd story here and there. And even Alaska, I remember I was looking at Alaska last year as well because high gold mining had been pulling out some big numbers out there. That it's good to see these areas because, like you said, a lot of people are paying attention to Newfoundland and a ton, especially in Quebec. The whole Abitibi Greenstone has got lots of attention. And the summer tends to be a time when people look a bit more at the Yukon, even the Golden Triangle, because they know that's such a resource-rich area, and people have their plans and looking.
Yeah. One thing I want to stress is the type of projects we have. We have high-grade epithermals and skarns. There's obviously active placer operations, but we're on to what's a very large copper gold or gold bias porphyry system. And as Pierre Lassonde was just saying a couple of weeks ago on Kitco, this is what you're going to want to find. And when you've got copper and gold in a deposit together, you have nirvana. And so we know we're onto something, and it's at least 2 million ounces gold equivalent now. We know it's going to be a lot larger.
So this is good because it's really tackling together. Look at all the data, taking steps, and build out that resource more and more. So we're going to be watching, and we'll look forward to having you back on as soon as you have more information, more details, any data that you can share. Because especially if it's with the AI, you might have to walk us through it a little bit. But we really appreciate you taking the time to share with us what's happening.
Great, thanks a lot, Andrew. Thanks a lot, Austin. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, John.
Have a great day.
Okay.
Take care, John.
Bye.